Hello. I made myself some peppermint tea because it makes me feel brave, and holding the mug gives me something to do with my hands, because talking to the camera like this makes me exceptionally uncomfortable. So, here's hoping that this does the trick. So today I wanted to go over curriculum ideas and create some quick lesson plans for Mr. Popper's Penguins, which is our silver screen book club pick for the month. I had forgotten how completely delightful this book is, and how short too. I think the audio was about 2 hours, but it packs quite a bit into just a small book. But so I do want to get to that, and we will go over some lesson ideas, but I felt like it was important to preface with like a footnote aside. No, it's more than that. It's important. So I wanted to preface with, yes, I think that a literature-based homeschool is the best. I won't sugarcoat it. I think that basing your school around books and stories is the best way to teach your kids and to learn together and to connect. My kids and I have so many little one-liners and inside jokes because of books that we've read together or movies that we've watched together. And reading together really does create magic. And so I feel like this is the best way, because the whole idea behind homeschooling was never to bring public school home. You don't need to model that. The whole purpose of homeschooling is freedom. Freedom for you to teach your kids in the way that is best for them and for you. Freedom to instill in them the values that are important to you and your family. Freedom for them to not be stuck at a desk for hours upon hours a day being told to be quiet, and when they can and can't go to the bathroom or can and can't have something to eat, and to learn in a way that sparks joy and curiosity and that lets them explore their interests, because you can turn any interest into curriculum. Right now, Max is very into WWE. I know, I know. It is what it is. But we support our kids in whatever their interests are. So we have found books about WWE superstars and facts about, the different wrestlers. We have used wrestling action figures for math. We have studied geography based on where different wrestlers are from within the US. You really can get creative and support your child's interests. Mariah has done not slideshows, but like presentations on various skincare products. She, like every other tween and teen right now, is very much into skincare, and so we've used that, and she's, for creative writing, developed her own line of products. And you can just cater to your kids' curiosity when you allow homeschool to just mold to fit your family, instead of trying to mold your family to fit the homeschool that you think you need or want. The first favor you can do yourself is get rid of the idea that it needs to be aesthetic. It doesn't. It can look like whatever. Max usually does his school in my unmade bed while I'm working. Mariah's usually in her room on her bed or on the floor. We don't have a dedicated classroom. We don't have beautiful bins filled with perfectly organized homeschool things. They each have a basket with the things that they need, and it just travels with us wherever we are. So the point I wanted to make was that your homeschool should fit your family, and a literature-based homeschool allows you to do that. It allows you to find stories that fit your values, that fit your kids' interests, that allow you to experience the world from someone else's perspective. And that is the point that I want to make here, is that while you're going through, and we're going to talk about math and science and geography within Mr. Popper today, don't forget the value of the story itself, because the book alone is enough. And yes, we need to teach our kids, math and science and all of the things, but don't get so caught up in extracting the math and the science and the geography and the history that you lose sight of the importance of the story. We don't want to water the story down to nothing but a bunch of lesson plans. That is to say, so we could use last week's Frog and Toad as an example. Yes, there's math and counting buttons, and there is science in baking cookies and learning about frogs and toads and ponds, but there is also friendship and kindness and supporting one another. And there's, being yourself. There's one story where frog or toad wears a bathing suit into the swimming pool or pond or wherever they're swimming, and none of the other animals do. And he tells Frog, like, tell everyone to go away. I'm in my bathing suit and I don't want them to see. But of course, all the other animals are now dying to see Toad in his bathing suit. And finally, he decides that he doesn't care. And he pulls himself up out of the water and he walks home with his head held high in his bathing suit while everyone is laughing. But he stays true to himself. He wanted to wear the bathing suit. He wore the bathing suit. And that is a lesson in being who you are, regardless of what other people say or do. And it would be so sad to overlook that lesson, that little tidbit, in favor of learning about the ecosystem that builds inside of a pond. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense here. I just don't want us to overlook the life lessons. I don't want us to overlook the opportunity to learn about friendship and kindness and empathy and hope, because those are what make middle grade books so magical. That is what these books are really meant to do. If you think about a book like Wonder, right? That is an entire lesson in empathy. Or The War That Saved My Life. We get to step into the shoes of a little girl during World War II who has this horrible mother. She has this painful deformity in her foot, and she's being sent to the country during World War II where she's living with a stranger and trying to navigate who she was and who she is and who she's becoming. And those are the kinds of things we don't want to overlook. We don't want to water down the story or gloss over the story in favor of World War II charts and timelines. And if that is what your child is interested in, please, absolutely, do delve, deep dive into the history, but also make sure that you are taking the time to appreciate the story, because we live in a world where hope is sometimes hard to find, especially now. Our kids, things are so different for our kids than they were for us. And now, you look at the news or out the window and half the world is on fire and the other half is at war. And these books bring those things to our kids as well. War and, dragons and monsters. But they also always bring them hope. They show us that, what is that quote that's, who is it? Is it C.S. Lewis or J.R. Tolkien? I will look it up and put it somewhere. That says, books are magic because they not only teach us that dragons exist, but that they can be slain, that they can be conquered. It's a fabulous quote, and I will find it. But that is the magic of books. Your child, like if your kids are anything like mine, if they're in the middle of a writing assignment and they don't know how to spell something, they ask Alexa. Or if they're in the middle of something for history and they can't remember a date or a name, they ask Alexa. Or if they're learning about earthquakes in a book and they want to know more, they go to YouTube and they look up videos on earthquakes. So they're able to find facts and information, all the things that they're required to memorize in public school, they can find easily themselves. What they can't ask Alexa for, what they can't go find, is empathy, is kindness, is the ability to step into someone else's shoes and experience the world through their eyes. They can't learn hope from an app, but they can in stories, because even when things are so bleak in stories, like A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park, that story still that one has stuck with me. But even as horrible as things get in that book, there is hope. There is always, always hope. And that is what is most important. Not the math, not the history, not knowing your geography. So as you're planning your curriculum and you're using literature as the basis of your homeschool, and to get ideas for math and all of the subjects, just don't forget the value of the story itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Mr. Popper. So in this story, we follow Mr. Popper, his wife, and their two kids, Janie and Ben. Mr. Popper is like a handyman, and it is the fall, and he has no work at the moment, and Mrs. Popper is very concerned about having a man around the house, and how she's going to keep it clean. I think she is so funny. And then Mr. Popper is obsessed with this explorer named Admiral Drake, who is in the Antarctic studying penguins, and he writes him a letter. And Admiral Drake, I think within like the first, it's like the end of chapter 2, Admiral Drake is on this radio show, and he basically says like, this is, a hello to Mr. Popper in Stillwater. I have a surprise for you. And it turns out that the surprise is an actual penguin in a box. So he sends him a penguin, and Mr. Popper is ecstatic, and he immediately begins trying to make this penguin comfortable, and he creates a home for him in the freezer. And anyway, hilarity abounds. And then the penguin, Captain Cook is what he calls him, gets really sick, and he's concerned that he's lonely. And then Greta enters the chat. She's another penguin. And then there are eggs, and then there are babies, and that leads to Mr. Popper putting on this penguin show, and they're making all of this money. It's funny. It's absurd in the best way. It's very quick. Super fun to read with your kids. I love the read alouds. I love and appreciate books with short chapters. I cannot stop in the middle of a chapter. It's obnoxious to me. So I love books where, like The Wild Robot is another one, where the chapters are just short. So you can feel really good about having read like 6 chapters, even if it was like 6 pages. But anyway, chapters are short. The book is short. The book is easy to read aloud. I did mention, I think on Instagram, that the audio is also fantastic. If you can borrow that through your library through the Libby app, it's got sound effects, voices, the whole 9. It's really fun. So let's just go ahead and dive in. What I did for this one, and I'll have the slides put up, but I made, I divided kids group. I don't like dividing or planning based on grade, because I think that grade level is subject. You're always going to have your kids who are ahead of their grade level or behind. I don't like that. So what I did, and you'll see in the slides, is I divided these up into littles, middles, and bigs. So for your littles, making popsicle stick penguins for math, and then on each popsicle stick you would write a number, and you can use something, I think goldfish crackers would be really fun. So you'd lay out your puppets, and then you would feed your penguin that many goldfish, however many the number was on their stick. Goldfish also make a fantastic math manipulative. And if you're feeling brave and it's warm, or you have something to contain them, ice cubes would also be really fun for counting. For your middles, use the same manipulatives as the others, goldfish or ice cubes, to add, subtract, multiply, divide, or you can create your child a list of story problems. The example I have is, if there are 12 penguins and 60 fish, how many fish will each penguin get? Things like that. Or, make it more complicated based on where they're at with math. Both groups can also do sequencing. If you take events from the story, put them onto note cards, or just, print them out and cut them out, they can sequence the story, and that is a fantastic math skill that often I think gets overlooked. And then your older kids, I think this book creates a really great opportunity for sort of an economics or finance lesson. I used to, for math for my kids, because things get boring, whatever they were interested in at the time, like Mariah went through a fashion design phase. So instead of giving her story problems or giving her math problems, just writing them out, I would give her receipts. And I would usually like rip paper, make them kind of fun. And it would be, like this person, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle bought these items, and it'll be like 12 dresses at $7 each and 2 pairs of shoes at $9 or whatever. And then she would add them up. Or if we needed multiplication, I would create problems like that. So this is an opportunity to do something like that, where maybe your oldest kids can create a business plan for Mr. Popper, showing what kind of money he needs to get started, what the costs of the show are going to be for the, whatever the venue charges for them to be there, or the fish to feed the penguins, or the taxi. They travel by taxi in the book, as well as, okay, what are you going to sell the tickets for? How many tickets are you going to sell? How much will that bring in? What is your net profit? So that kind of thing. It does require a little bit more work from you if you're going to provide the things, or your oldest kids like Mariah could just create their own and then take different scenarios to create, fun little math things that way. For something like that, if you don't want to waste a ton of paper, having a whiteboard is really handy. So if you just like divide up your whiteboard and he's got this many tickets at this much, the cost for this, and then you can just keep erasing the board and redoing problems. So that's just a little tip. Let's go ahead and move on to writing. Now this book in particular leaves a lot of room for creativity within writing. You could have your kids write a letter to Mr. Popper, asking him what it's like. Imagine that they could ask him anything. A letter to Mr. Popper is a quick way to, an easy, quick writing activity. Your littles could write a story about how Mr. Popper always wanted a pet penguin in the book. He always wanted a penguin for a pet. Words are hard. Your child could write about a pet that they have always wanted, and how would they accommodate that pet. So we have Mr. Popper first, set up his ice box for Captain Cook, but then when there were a ton, he ends up turning the entire basement into this icy Arctic playground. So how would they accommodate their pet? Your littles could write a story about what they think happened. Sorry, I have my tablet on my lap with my notes. So what they think happened when the penguins and Mr. Popper went to the North Pole. And this one is fun because you could write it in any format. So instead of just writing like a short story, which is totally fine, they could just write a short story about, continuing the story from where the book leaves off when Mr. Popper and the penguins are headed to the North Pole. They could write a short story. They could write a news article about Mr. Popper and the penguins and what's happening in the North Pole. They could write a journal entry as if they are Mr. Popper, writing about what is happening in the North Pole. There could be a letter from Mr. Popper to Mrs. Popper talking about what is happening. So that one's fun because it leaves it open to however your child likes to write. Do they want to be a journalist? Then writing news articles is really fun. For older writers, I like to do both a creative prompt and an essay prompt because both are important. And again, if we were just reading this just as a read aloud and I was not using this to create curriculum, we wouldn't do any of this. We would just talk about it because the book is enough, again, and having discussions about the book is plenty. But because we're talking about this as the basis of our curriculum, that is why we have all of these extra things. So for a creative prompt, they could rewrite a favorite scene from the book, but adding in modern twists. So the book takes place, I don't even know what year, but let's see, it was written originally in 1938. So, they're taking taxi cabs everywhere So maybe in your child's story, Mr. Popper gets an Uber, or instead of Admiral Drake, yeah, instead of him announcing his thing over the radio, maybe he FaceTimes him, or maybe you change up the way that they talk to include some of the slang that kids are using these days. But I think that would be a really fun, creative writing activity. They could consider language, slang, technology, social media, transportation, modern communication methods like FaceTime, text, as opposed to sending letters. And then for an essay prompt and research practice, they could research penguins in captivity and then construct an essay, a persuasive essay, either for or against keeping penguins in activity based on their research findings. So that's definitely something that would take a little bit more time and effort and is probably best for your teens and above. Unless you've got a child who really, really loves writing essays in particular. And then of course, anything else that you can dream up. You're only limited really by your imagination and your kids' abilities and interests. So moving on to science, obviously you can learn all about penguins. There are so many different types of penguins, species of penguins. You can learn about all of them, where they live, how they're similar, how they're different. Library books, YouTube videos, documentaries are fantastic resources for learning more about anything. So, if you're reading a book about penguins, you can find books and videos and movies. I mean, watch the movie Happy Feet. That's so fun. Why not? Tie that in. But if your kid is, if you read a book where the setting is during World War II or in another country or time period, let them deep dive. If they're interested in that, allow them the time and the space to really just dive down a rabbit hole and learn as much as they can until they're done, until they've quenched that thirst and can move on to something else. You could also do a sensory bin. I think that for little ones, especially, sensory bins are so fun. You could use water beads or that fake snow that you just add water to and it gets all nice and fluffy. You could put cotton balls or pom-poms in them as snowballs, and then any other toys or things that you can think of that would be fun for little hands to dig around and search in. For geography and history, obviously, with this book in particular, we can learn about Antarctica. We can also learn about the North Pole versus the South Pole. It comes up in this book a couple of times, and you can talk about, learn about the differences between the two. I think in the book it mentions that polar bears are in one and penguins are in the other, and I can't remember which is which now, but that is fun. Even just finding Antarctica and the poles on a globe or a map. And I just want to reiterate again that history in particular, it should feel like an excavation. It should feel like you're uncovering things that fascinate you, asking questions, learning interesting facts, unearthing things that you didn't know before. That's how history should feel. It shouldn't just be read this, write this, memorize this. Let your kids really let it be this slow discovery. I think that makes it meaningful. It makes it more, it makes it something they can connect with. I can't think of the word. And it makes it more fun and enjoyable as well. We don't need to memorize dates and names, just focus on what is sparking their curiosity. Again, videos, books, documentaries, go to the library and check out everything they have on penguins and just spend the rest of the day or the week just perusing books. You can learn about Antarctica, what animals are found there, what the weather and seasons are like. Ask questions and then see if you can use your resources to answer them. And of course, you can keep it as surface level or go as in-depth as your readers, your child's interests and abilities allow. You could also learn about famous Arctic explorers. A couple of them that I looked up were Roald Amundsen and Ernest Shackleton. That could be really cool. That could take you into an entire other unit on Arctic explorers and then other explorers, because those stories can be really fascinating. And then finally, arts and hands-on activities. All of your ages could create a fun penguin guidebook with different types of penguins, what they eat, and plenty of illustrations. They can cut, paste, glue, paint, draw, whatever, and put together a book however they want. It's really fun to allow them to just use pieces of paper and then, you know, use yarn and a big fat needle to stitch them together, or tie them together with a ribbon. Or if you just want to provide each child a blank book to fill in, that works as well. One thing that can be really fun is Mr. Popper, again, creates a home within his home for the penguins, and you could provide just a bunch of random supplies, shoe boxes, string, glue, paper, whatever you can think of, and allow your kids to assemble a penguin house. You know, what might that look like with the items that are provided, and then let them think like, oh, you know what would work for this, and send them, you know, let them go run and grab other things as their creativity sort of, you know, the creative wheels start turning. You could use face paint to paint your face like a penguin, or make penguin masks and put on a penguin parade or play. You could make fun penguin themed treats. I'm going to put some links in the description of this video for a few that I found that were simple. You don't want it to turn into a whole thing, but there was like, I think penguin marshmallows are one of them. Things that you probably already have or could get really quickly and easily when you run to the store. And then if you're going to join the Silver Screen Book Club and you're going to watch the movie, part of your art could be creating decorations for your movie watch party, creating tickets for the movie, designing fun costumes to wear to watch the movie. The options here are endless. So within one book, and however long this video ends up being, we've got plans that could probably last at least a couple of weeks. We've got enough of, you know, a book to go around. I mean, if you've got more time and your kids are loving the book, you could probably do this all within a week. But I would say probably space it out over 2 weeks. And then you don't need to do every single subject every day. We don't need to have writing, math, art, history, geography, science every single day. So, you know, space it out. Maybe we do math on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we do writing on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we save art and baking for Fridays. So space it out, especially if you've got younger learners. In another video, because I know I've had a couple people ask, and I know people are thinking, okay, but what about like my junior high school kids? Like, this isn't enough. And I get that. I'm right there with you. Mariah's in 8th grade. So I will go over in a future video how exactly we homeschool, what our homeschool looks like, what we're using, and how we're sort of making sure that all of the gaps are filled, because she does have to start getting high school credits next year, and we want to make sure that she's prepared with just, you know, she has to finish 8th, and then she's got 9th through 12th, and she's done. So that is insane to me, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that like this does still work with your older kids, just on a different level, because Mariah's not interested, of course, in making penguin puppets or building a penguin house, but she could do a research paper on penguins in captivity. And then we do use an online curriculum that I will talk about again a little bit later. But just spread this out. The book is enough. Reading the story together, talking about penguins, taking a trip to the library and picking up books on penguins, you know, doing a little bit of math, some writing, learning about explorers and Antarctica for your history and geography, learning about penguins for science. You don't have to make it any more complicated than that. The world has changed. It's not the same as it was when we were kids, and information is readily available. So focus on the things that your kids can't be taught in a classroom more than you focus on, you know, solving for X. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you get something out of this. And now I will go on and put the slides up and flip through each of those so that you can screenshot those, and we'll see